What is the role of technology in Africa's development? I think the first thing I always say is that technology must only ever be seen to be a means to an end. It's not the end in itself. If you want to boil water in a kettle, you need electricity. If you want to move goods around or people around or data around, in some shape or form, you need technology, but it's not the end in itself. So what can technology do? It can certainly bring in checks and balances. It can record more and more numbers, news, views, videos, pictures. Technology can help analyze all of that. It can help us with forecasting. It can help us speed processes up. But unless we really know why we're using that technology, what was the problem in the first place? Not just the what. We could end up accelerating leaking processes, inefficient processes, or we could end up allowing the wrong people and organizations to have access to this data. So I think we have to be very careful what problem it is that we want to solve in the first place and why, and we need to build that consensus, and that consensus might not be perfect, but at least we should have started that journey on using technology effectively. And then, very importantly, find the most suitable technology, and I'll talk a bit more about this, for your needs and your budget. Don't go for a sledgehammer when in fact all you need is a screwdriver. I think with all these emerging technologies, there's a tendency to say, oh, we must use because it's fashionable. Whereas actually there might be alternatives which are perfectly suitable and cost 1/10 of the price and actually have been around for a lot longer and are reliable, etc. But let me go back then to the deficit of technology in Africa more specifically, more generally. I think one index that's very useful for people to look at is the Network Readiness Index, which was originally started by the World Economic Forum. It's been hived off now, but it's a global index on how ICT, information and communications technology, is used and applied in 121 economies. And the highest scoring African country is Mauritius, at 53 out of 121, then South Africa at 72, and then Rwanda at 89, Kenya at 93, and then you can see I'm starting to hit the sort of lower end of the list. But I think what's really important is that there are 4 pillars that this index is based on. Technology itself, which includes access, which in itself includes affordability, and that's very important. I think technology in some parts of the continent, like mobile data, for example, in South Africa, extremely expensive. Content, and then what we call emerging or future technologies like artificial intelligence. So that's one pillar. Then the second pillar, very important, is people, individuals, whether that's, regardless of gender, whether they're in urban areas, rural areas, rich, poor, better educated, less well educated, differently abled. How are they using technology? And how do we build that capacity in all of these communities to absorb and benefit equally from these, the opportunities that technology can bring? Because if we leave people behind, we have an issue. Businesses, from the fledgling to the multinational, how are they using technology and participating in the economy? And of course, thirdly, governments. How are they using and investing in ICT for the benefit of their citizens and businesses? So I think, especially with these newer technologies, AI, augmented reality, virtual reality, IoT, Internet of Things, as we start seeing them gain momentum, governments, individual African governments and the AU really need to think how best to combine these for their country's development for the right reasons and bring their populations along. And if we don't do it for the right reasons, we're just going to create more inequality and less democracy. And I don't think that's in anybody's interest. And then the third pillar is governance. So that would include things like trust. I think here I'm going to start comparing Africa with parts of Asia, because we look at COVID-19 and we look at contact tracing. Why were some countries in Asia more successful in mitigating the spread of the virus? It's because people were ready to be traceable, to use various devices to be reached. It's why Estonia is often touted as the digital cradle to grave country. But trust is not a quick win. And if it's broken, it's very hard to regain. So I think, in Africa, we need to think about that. And the next thing is regulation. All I will say here is just be careful of unintended consequences. Regulation should be there to help develop an economy, not just slap people on the wrist. I think that's something really important that governments do need to think about, to make sure that this increase of internet access, there's an enabling environment to do that. And good governance will ensure that we become more inclusive, and we reduce those gaps, whether it's gender, physical ability, etc. And then the final pillar is impact. So that's impact on the economy, impact on quality of life, contribution to the SDGs. And all I'll say here is that we're moving away from a linear ownership-based economy to a more sharing and circular economy. And in some ways, maybe the rest of the world is catching up with Africa and Asia as far as that's concerned. And I think we need to look at where technology fits in that. So I'm not trying to avoid the question, but I am saying that each country in Africa does need to look where it is in all of these pillars, and then needs to figure out what are its priorities, and how it's going to be part of this sort of so-called fourth industrial revolution.